Hello and welcome to the Frank J. Meitz Maintenance Management Institute, hereafter referred to as the Meitz Institute. The mission of the Meitz Institute is to bring to professional maintenance personnel like yourselves the most modern and advanced maintenance management techniques and applications through our seminars. Each seminar addresses specific maintenance topics, from fundamentals to management applications that you can use on the job every day. This particular seminar is entitled Managing Maintenance with Computer Assistance. In other words, we are going to talk about the basic requirements to help you not only select but install and maintain a CMMS, Computerized Maintenance Management System. If you would turn to the index in the notebook, I would like to address the 10 sections that we will be covering in this particular seminar. Section 1 pertains to the introduction of the maintenance management program. There are many various introductions to a maintenance management program. We have used this particular introduction for over 34 years and have found that it is very easy for people to understand, that is, the various functions within a maintenance management program, and it also addresses the various functions and their interrelationships. Item 2 pertains to the asset equipment listing and the various spare parts that are used within those assets by the maintenance organization. Section 3 pertains to what we call the spare parts where used list. In other words, every spare part would have an identification relative to the asset or the equipment it is used in, and that is a key requirement for various applications that we will discuss when we get into section number 3. Section 4 is the heart of the spare parts inventory planning program, which is entitled Inventory Management. We will walk you through the various inventory management techniques, show you the various formulas that represent those techniques. We have illustrations that identifies how the technique is actually put to work, and we will also go into other areas like the ABC analysis, which is the input into cost reduction, and also cycle counting. And we will be concluding with an outline which addresses the JIT, the just-in-time, relative to spare parts inventory planning. Section 5 addresses the purchasing management system, and here again we will talk about the various applications that purchasing requires in order to support the maintenance management program. Item 6 pertains to the storeroom, the crib. Some people will refer to that as a warehouse or a tool room. Irrespective of what you call it, it really is the disciplines to maintain the data integrity of bin on hand and location relative to bin on hand. Section number 7 gets into what we call craft capacity planning, and that is really the counterpart of section number 4, where we talk about spare parts planning. Well, section 7 addresses the labor planning, and we will show you how to establish a craft capacity plan, and this is supported by what we call a craft capacity planning matrix for your decision relative to what percentage of craft utilization do I want to start with relative to scheduling labor against various maintenance work orders. Section 8 pertains to the maintenance work order planning and scheduling activity, which is really the heart of the inventory and labor planning systems. We will address the differences between both planned and unplanned requirements and show you how those planned and unplanned requirements are tracked in the inventory management program, and how the storeroom actually supports the housing of those planned and unplanned requirements, which is totally integrated with the 8th section, maintenance work order planning and scheduling. And the 9th section pertains to the labor reporting, and there are basically 4 major areas that we're going to talk about in this section. The first one would be time on the job. The second is the individual craft observations. The third is their findings. And the fourth is their recommendations for operating improvement. We'll go through those various requirements with you in this seminar in great detail. And Section 10, the last section, pertains to the financial analysis of the entire maintenance management program. We will provide you with several lists, if you will, of some of the various financial records that you may want to consider, and hopefully by the time you're through with this section, you'll have a very good input relative to the types of reports that are required not only within the maintenance organization but within the total company. Now, moving forward into section number 1, I want to address 2 pages, and that's the first 2 pages that really is kind of the keystone for this particular seminar. As the first paragraph illustrates, the maintenance management function is somewhat unique in that other people outside of the maintenance organization may have a difficult time on trying to define for the maintenance organization the various CMMS requirements. And as I said a few moments ago, working with many companies over 34 years, we have developed a 3-point program which, if followed, will help you to not only select your own requirements, but implement and maintain a very excellent CMMS program. The first element is user-defined, and basically what that illustrates is that every individual within the maintenance organization that is going to generate some type of data, be responsible for various records, and as an example, reports, must define their requirements as an integral part of the development of the CMMS program. The second step is user-originated, and here is the disciplines of actually putting all of the data elements into CMMS. In other words, someone must be responsible to put the data relative to assets, their spare parts requirements, and the maintenance requirements. Somebody has to be responsible to establish the inventory management system, likewise the purchasing management system, and the stores management system. Someone also has to be responsible to develop the craft capacity planning program, and also be responsible to develop the maintenance work order planning and scheduling system, which addresses both planned and unplanned maintenance work orders. And last, someone has to be responsible to train the maintenance personnel, that is those people that are actually going to perform maintenance tasks in terms of the type of data that we would like to have received from them as a byproduct of their analysis on the job, And as I made reference to that type of analysis earlier, it pertains not only to the total time on the job, but their observations, findings, and recommendations for operating improvement. And last, we have to develop the type of various management reports that are in the last section of this notebook, and those should be tailored to meet all of management-specific requirements. Now, the third application is what I refer to as user-maintained, and this is very critical relative to the maintenance of the entire CMMS program. First of all, we're going to address what we call a new item notice, or some people refer to it as a new part notice system. And that addresses the ability for you, as new assets are entering the operation or other type of functional activities within the organization, to establish those assets within CMMS, the recommended spare parts that may be used by maintenance at some point in time, and also establish the maintenance requirements for those assets. So the first key element is a new item notice or a new part notice system. The second key element is an engineering change notice system, and that pertains to when I make modifications either to equipment or assets, or I'm going to replace a spare part for another spare part, that we have the proper procedures, the documentations in place, so that we can maintain the integrity of all of the records within CMMS. And the third major element is an obsolescence program. I have seen too many storerooms that are loaded with obsolescence, and the key requirement to eliminate obsolescence is to have naturally a good obsolescence program in place. And here we need what we call the spare part equipment where used list, which is in the third section of the notebook. So those are the three major, let's call them planning applications for CMMS. And let me repeat those again: user-defined, user-originated, and user-maintained. And I guarantee if you follow the disciplines of those three applications, which we will discuss in this seminar, and follow the various data elements that we're going to cover with you during this entire seminar, and all of the data is in the notebook that we have provided you with, then you should have an excellent CMMS program. Now, turning to page number 1, we're going to look at 6 different types of maintenance programs. Now, these particular programs are addressed on page 2, and these 6 different types of maintenance management programs has been developed by myself based upon my years of working with companies like yourself. The first one is a reactive maintenance organization. In other words, firefighting. Now, as I go through these particular different maintenance management programs, I want you to rank where you are relative to these 6 different programs. And the key is for you to migrate all the way to the 6th one, which is really what I call world-class, but we'll talk about that in a moment. The second type of maintenance management program is some proactive maintenance. We're doing some planning, but not 100% of planning. Most of the companies that I have been associated with over years are somewhere between 1 and 2. The third one is preventative maintenance, but that doesn't mean I'm just starting PM. That means that all of my assets where PM requirements are required to maintain the assets, that my entire PM program is up and running. The fourth is an enhancement to the PM program, and that is predictive maintenance. The acronym is PDM. Predictive maintenance is embracing some of the machine operators to support the maintenance management program. And a little later in the seminar, we will address some various applications where, as an example, machine operators can participate, and we're going to show you how you should evaluate the maintenance work orders themselves so that they can independently support a PDM application. The next one, item number 5, is TPM, or total productive maintenance. And here is where we have the entire, let's call it operating unit to support maintenance. And in many cases, operating personnel are actually working shoulder to shoulder with maintenance craft personnel in replacing gears and bearings and motors and any other type of application which requires the changing of spare parts. Now, the last, item number 6, is what I call world-class maintenance, and that is where I have a culmination of both the maintenance management planning and scheduling system with the operations planning and scheduling system. And this really takes about a minute or two to explain in terms of this culmination. First of all, irrespective of whether or not you have the best CMMS program on hand, it is working independently of the, let's call it the operations material planning system, whether it's MRP, which is material requirements planning, or MRP2, manufacturing resource planning. We have 2 completely independent software programs. Now, the key to world-class is to integrate those planning systems, as I mentioned earlier. And we have been working with several companies to do this integration. It's very easy, but the systems have to be compatible. They have to be able to talk to one another. We're going to go through some of the basics relative to helping you move into a world-class environment, but providing you have the disciplines in place, and we will be talking about many, many disciplines during this seminar. Now, the next exhibit pertains to the introduction of the maintenance management program. And again, I want to preface that this is the way I perceive a maintenance management program or a maintenance management system. And again, as I said earlier, by utilizing these 9 particular functions, we have been very successful in helping companies either develop the maintenance management program in a manual or a semi-manual environment, or moving them directly into CMMS. Now, when you talk about these functions in CMMS, we refer to them as modules. That is a module within CMMS. These modules are totally integrated. Communication flows from one module to another where it's applicable, and that is really the software requirement in terms of the way CMMS should function. Now, I'd like to at least walk you through these 9 modules, since we are talking about managing maintenance with computer assistance, we will be talking about modules as opposed to functions. Now, the first module is what I call the heart of CMMS. It includes all of our assets, all of the spare parts that are going to be required to maintain those assets, and all of the maintenance requirements in terms of how we're going to maintain the assets. The second module is a byproduct of the first one, and that is the spare parts equipment where used list. And in the next page, we're going to show you how that is actually developed. The third module is the inventory management system, and we're going to show you how that's integrated with the maintenance work order planning and scheduling system, the purchasing system, and also the stores or warehousing system. The next module 4 is the purchasing system, and we'll talk about the integration of purchasing with inventory, stores, and maintenance work order planning and scheduling. The next one is the warehousing system, and here is the depository for all of the maintenance work order planning and scheduling, and that really supports the release or the issuance of work orders to craft personnel, and we will go into the detail on how that particular activity works within CMMS. Then we have craft capacity planning, which is the sixth module, and here we develop our labor requirements. That is, for each employee that's an integral part of the maintenance craft, how many available hours should I put into the craft capacity plan so that I could properly plan and then subsequently schedule those particular hours. The next is the maintenance work order planning and scheduling system, and here we're going to look at the differences between planned and unplanned requirements, and through that planning and scheduling process, we're going to show you how you can reduce, if you do it right, your total spare parts inventory investment by approximately 70 to 80% in real dollars. And item number 8 is the reporting activity, which is the input into the modifications, if there are any, relative to planned maintenance work orders. Look at the equipment based upon the observations, the findings, and the recommendations relative to craft personnel. And the ninth module pertains to all of the financial requirements relative to the entire maintenance management program. Now, if you would turn to page number 4, I'm just going to spend a few moments on this exhibit to show you the interrelationship of these particular modules and how they literally work with each other. The first thing I want you to do is look at the 7th module, Maintenance Work Order Planning and Scheduling. There are 4 arrows that actually come out of that particular module. If you remember, I indicated that that's the heart of the maintenance work order planning and scheduling system. If you look at that arrow on the left-hand side that goes from 7 up to 1, that is really the link between all of the equipment and assets, the spare parts requirements, and the maintenance requirements. That, in essence, is what is triggering maintenance work order planning and scheduling. The line that comes out of the right-hand side going up to Module 3, the inventory system, is addressing the spare part requirements as a function or a byproduct of that line on the left-hand side going from 7 up to 1. You'll also notice that in the center of the page there is a little arrow going from 7 to 6. That is addressing the labor content. So what we've done here is we've completely integrated maintenance work order planning and scheduling, starting off with the first module, then integrating the spare parts requirements with the third module, inventory management, and likewise integrating the maintenance work order and planning and scheduling function with the sixth module, craft capacity planning, which is the labor function. Now, the arrow coming out of 7 down into 8 in the middle of the page is the actual release of the work order, and there are 2 arrows that come out of 8. These are reporting activities. The first arrow on the right-hand side going from 8 to 7 is the feedback, the reporting from the various craft personnel working on maintenance work orders, irrespective of whether they're planned or unplanned. And these are the observations, the findings, the recommendations for operating improvement, and also the time on the job. And that arrow coming out of 8 on the left-hand side to 9 is really a culmination of all of those labor activities and converting those into reports relative to support top management in the 9th module called the financial analysis. Now I want to go up to the first module on the right-hand side, and you see that arrow that comes down to the second module, which is the equipment spare parts wear use list. Well, that is how the spare parts wear use list is generated. Item 1 has the asset or the equipment, and it lists all of the spare parts underneath it that may be used by maintenance at some point in time. What we do is we take the reciprocal of that. In the production side, they call that implosion, and for each and every spare part, which is listed in item 1, but now we're talking about the same spare part that is going to be listed in module 2, it now reverts to the identification of all of the assets where that spare part is used in. And now moving to the third module, inventory management, there's an arrow that drops down to module 4, which is the purchasing management module, and those are inventory requirements that must be supported by purchasing. So out of the left-hand side of module 4, purchasing management, going to module 5, which is the warehouse or the stores management module, that little arrow really ties in the vendor supply base, the procurement of all of the items that are required, and those items ultimately find their way into the storeroom through the receiving inspection activities of the storeroom, and ultimately material is either applied to planned maintenance work orders and stored in a planned maintenance work order area, or the items are put into the general inventory class, which is classified as material to be used for future unplanned requirements. So what we have concluded here, and page number 4, is a complete integration of all of the 9 modules within CMMS. And these activities are going to be covered in detail as we move through the balance of the seminar. Now, moving over to page number 5, there are 6 questions that must be answered when you start to establish maintenance work order planning. And remember, maintenance work order scheduling is a byproduct of maintenance work order planning. You can't schedule until you plan. Now, we're going to talk about the questions here, and I'll make some comments as we review these particular questions. First of all, what will we maintain? That is really that arrow that came out of the preceding page from Module 7 up to Module 1. That's addressing the input into the maintenance management program. relative to planning and scheduling. Then what must be done are the individual maintenance requirements, as I've alluded to before. And that really is the maintenance activity that would encompass, as an example, preventative maintenance, major overhauls, minor overhauls, or any other maintenance activity that is required to support the integrity of the company assets. How long will it take is a function of the planning process, and that is the labor planning process. But you're going to see in our labor planning process, we actually have 4 major steps. The first step pertains to what we call maintenance work order preparation. And we'll define what preparation is, but currently that pertains to having all of the spare parts, any special tooling, equipment, and documentation that may be required available by the storeroom. The second planning process would be the actual travel time to the job site. The third major planning process would be that time which is required to actually perform the maintenance activity. And the fourth one is the travel from the job site either back to the maintenance shop or maybe to another asset and continue on in what we call a maintenance work order sequential scheduling environment. Sequential scheduling is to schedule 2 or more work orders in sequence. Now, how often will we perform the task is a function of 4 different data inputs. The first one can be from a shop calendar, which is a fixed input. Every 90 days I have to perform an activity. Every 120 days I have to perform another activity, and so forth. The second input would be from machine hour meters that are actually metering the running time of machines or other assets. The third would be the input from odometer readings on rolling stock. And the fourth would be the input from your predictive maintenance program. So how often is going to be basically a function of those 4 what we call planned requirements. Now, if I have a planned, unplanned maintenance work order request, that is going to be another type of an input to answer, how often should we do it. But the key is if we do our planning and scheduling properly, the amount of unplanned requests should certainly diminish. Now, who will perform the task? That pertains to the craft personnel. But as you'll see when we get into the section in craft capacity planning, we have other capacity requirements to consider that will address the question, who will perform the task. It's not only the craft personnel, but it's machine operators. It could also develop into, let's say, outside contractors performing a certain planned maintenance requirements. And then item number 6 is the basic requirements of what we call the spare parts, the special tools, the special equipment, and any special documentation that is required. So these 6 questions are going to be paramount into supporting a successful CMMS program when it comes to planning and scheduling. Now, I will admit that you may not have spare parts on every planned requirement. You may not need special tools or equipment or documentation, but you must address these 6 questions so you least not forget a specific requirement for a planned maintenance work order. Now, moving on to page number 6, there are 2 pages here where we're going to review what we call the 2 major planning and scheduling activities. Page number 6 pertains to internal planning and scheduling. And as you'll see in a moment, page number 7 addresses the external planning and scheduling. So let's take a look at some of the data elements in sequence relative to internal planning and scheduling. And as you'll notice, the heading that I have selected is Maintenance Work Order Planning and Scheduling. The work order means internal. The first step is to address the first module within CMMS. What's required, who's going to do it, what's the frequency, the things that we just covered in the preceding exhibit. Then we have to plan, that's step 2. And here is a critical data element for your key consideration. Planning can go out as far as the OEM, original equipment manufacturer's maintenance recommendations. In other words, I may have PM planned out for 1 year, if not longer. I could have minor overhauls planned out 1 to 2 years. Major overhauls can be planned out 1, 2, and even 3 years in advance. Now, the key for the success of scheduling is the planning step. And if you remember previously, I said planning precedes scheduling. What type of planning are we talking about? Basically 2 types. The labor planning and the spare parts planning. Now just visualize the requirements for the spare parts planning out into the future are going to be recorded on the inventory record for that specific item, which is a planning requirement out into the future when that spare part is required. If you remember that arrow that came out of item 7 on the right-hand side on page 4, and it went up to 3 inventory system, and I said, that's the spare parts planning. Well, here's where we're actually putting that into an application. I also am going to plan the labor requirement. Therefore, I'm going to do what we call an allocation or a reservation of a specific craft requirement for that planning period. As time progresses and that planning period comes in to within 1 or maybe 2 weeks into the future, meaning from this point forward, I can now schedule that particular planned maintenance work order. I have my labor content, I have my spare parts availability. Now what I have to make certain of is, can I release that planned maintenance work order through the scheduling system, which looks out, as I said a moment ago, 1 to 2 weeks in advance, and will the asset be available so that I can actually release not only the planned order to schedule, but release the schedule order to work in process, or some people may call it the maintenance work order release application. I don't care how you identify it, but those are 3 steps: plan, schedule, and then release or issue. And then we also are going to have the reporting aspect, which I cover in step number 5. And I didn't mean to overlook the steps 2, 3, and 4, but I just went through those in my illustration. And that's the reporting aspect back. And when we get into the section of the notebook where we're going to talk about craft reporting, we'll get into some of the details in that particular application. And then as item number 6 addresses, which is really the financial requirements for that particular maintenance work order. Now, if you turn to page number 7, we're going to address what I call the external planning and scheduling application. And in this case, I call it purchase order planning and scheduling. Purchase order is external. And here's where I'm dealing with my vendor base. Now, item 1 is the same item 1 that we looked at before. So it doesn't really require any repetitiveness at this point in time. But 2 is the inventory of spare parts. And here again, that's that arrow from 7 going up to 3 on page 4 on the right-hand side of the exhibit. Once I develop the vendor or vendors that are going to supply the spare parts, then I get into spare parts planning, and then I actually release the order to the supplier, and then the follow-up by purchasing is to receive the material, and then we get the material in through not only receiving, but we're going to go through receiving inspection, and we'll get into that area in greater detail when we get into the stores program. And then we will store the material for the planned maintenance work order in the planned maintenance work order area, and then it can be released, as I've indicated previously on page number 6. And then ultimately, we again will pull the financials together relative to that planning process. The financials on page number 6 had to do with the labor portion. The financials on page number 7 in item 8 is the spare parts requirements, and I have both of those going in. And the third element I would require would be the overhead function, which would likewise be charged to the maintenance work order, and any other records that would be updated as a byproduct of that particular work order in its closeout steps. Now, I'd like to review with you on page number 8 the 4 major planning functions that are integral within CMMS. The first one is the maintenance work order planning and scheduling activity. That is the starting point. As I've said before, it's the heart of the planning and scheduling system in maintenance management. Secondly, we're going to address the inventory management portion, and third is the purchasing management portion, and fourth is the storeroom management portion. And so you won't forget, craft capacity requirements is actually an integral part of item number 1 above. Now what we're going to do is to take those planning functions and put those into what I call a functional organization. And that functional organization actually starts on page number 9, and it addresses inventory management, capacity planning and scheduling, the work in process, that's where I release the orders to the craft personnel, the purchasing activity, and then warehousing and stores. And moving along into the next 6 exhibits, the first one, which is on page number 10, addresses the individual functions within this entire maintenance management planning environment. You'll notice in the center of the page we have what is called maintenance manager. It could be a maintenance supervisor, a foreman. Titles are immaterial at this point in time. But the key is to understand how these 5 functions are integrated organizationally. Remember, if you went back to page number 4 in this section, we've tried to do that with some arrows and the different modules. And here we're going to talk about a little more detail relative to each one of those 4 planning activities. Starting off at the left, we have inventory management. Next, we have capacity planning and scheduling. The next, we show work in process control, which is really the reporting. And then we have warehousing and stores. And last, we have the purchasing activity. So moving on to page number 11. Here we're addressing inventory management. And if you move all the way to the left-hand side of this exhibit, you'll see a block entitled Inventory Management. Below that, you're going to see another block entitled Equipment Spare Parts List. That means everything that is required from a spare part standpoint, lubricants, cleaning media, whatever is required to maintain the validity of those assets is going to have an inventory record. And the inventory record is going to be recorded relative to the requirements coming from the maintenance work order planning and scheduling application. And here we're addressing at the bottom of the page the two types of maintenance work orders, planned and unplanned. And I cannot emphasize strongly enough the importance of having all of your work orders coded planned and unplanned. And a little later in this seminar, we're going to show you how to do that. Now, as a byproduct of the spare parts planning, then moving from inventory management to capacity planning and scheduling, we have a little box identified as A. That indicates that the maintenance work orders have been covered by spare parts requirements. Coming out of inventory management, we also have B, and that is where we did not have sufficient inventory on hand and we had to purchase items. So B represents the purchase requisition. Now, when we have A coming out of the inventory system, we will address whether or not we had inventory on hand. If there was insufficient inventory on hand, then once that purchase order has been placed for that inventory requirement, there is going to be a cross-reference between the planned maintenance work order and the purchase order for that planned item, and conversely, the planned purchase work order is going to have the planned maintenance work order posted to it. So we are continually cross-referencing purchase orders to work orders, especially where we have planned spare parts requirements. And this is a discipline that's required to make certain that when there is a spare part requirement, we have fulfilled the obligation of that planned maintenance work order. Now, the next exhibit on page number 12 pertains to capacity planning and scheduling. And if you notice, in the center of the page, we have a box entitled Craft Planning and Scheduling. Below that, there is a box called Maintenance Operations Standards. Now, those are the estimated or the developed as a byproduct of actual work performed by craft people, the time and the task associated with those times. So one of the key requirements to support maintenance work order planning and then subsequently scheduling is to start to develop standards relative to operations, if you will, that are repetitive. So you want to develop what we call a maintenance operations standards database. And as a byproduct of capacity planning and scheduling, we have 3 individual boxes that emanate from that activity. Box D pertains to any inventory adjustments that should be made to the inventory record. C are the load reports and some schedules for maintenance supervision, assuming that you may have more than one maintenance supervisor. And then E is going to the individual craft supervisors for those companies of, let's say, the medium or the large size, where the craft personnel are managed by what we would call craft supervisors, and then those craft supervisors would report to maintenance supervision. Now, moving on to page number 13, we have work in process control. And this is actually the reporting activity. And you'll notice that there are a couple boxes that we want to identify. First of all, in the center, we have maintenance labor reporting. So item F is the time on the work order, and we'll go into the detail of that when we get into the reporting function, which is the 9th section of the notebook. Item G pertains to anything that had to be returned to the storeroom, maybe special tools, equipment, documentation, and it is conceivable that maybe the wrong part number was on the planned maintenance work order, and that would have to be returned, or maybe there was an excess issued out of the storeroom because the quantity on the work order was incorrect. And those are things that you're going to shake down as you start to improve the maintenance work order reporting activity. And moving on to the purchasing function, we have in the center of page number 14 the purchasing box. And here again, that is integrated with planning and scheduling by item H, which is vendor delivery information. And remember, we said we're going to cross-reference the purchase order to the work order and vice versa. Well, box H is actually supporting that. And then we have actually issued the purchase order for spare parts, which is item I. And through the vendor shipping process, we receive that material into the storeroom. And ultimately, item K out of the storeroom indicates notification of the item. And that could not be done if we didn't cross-reference the purchase order to the maintenance work order and vice versa. So here you could see we're taking 3 individual modules: capacity planning and scheduling, purchasing, and warehousing and stores, and integrating them relative to their functional requirements. Now, on the last page, page number 15, we're addressing the warehousing and stores activity, and actually that is integrated with all of the other 3 planning functions, but here we want to address its integration with the supplier in terms of receiving material, or which is item L. N is returning material to the supplier. That could be an overage. It could be because of poor quality, or it could be an item that is going to a supplier for repair. The material movement O is to actually either issue material to craft personnel against a planned maintenance work order, or delivering material to the job site. And M is the receiving of spare parts and tooling and equipment and documentation, etc. Now, what we have done with these last 5 pages, pages number 11 to 15, is show you how they're totally integrated. One of the easiest educational tools that I could think of is to take the 6 pages from 10 to 15 and put those on some type of a pegboard. Page 10 in the top, and pages 11 to 15 down at the bottom. And you could thoroughly train anyone in the maintenance organization in terms of what each function or module consists of and its interrelationship with other modules. Also, I would suggest that you use page number 4 in addition to these pages 10 to 15 to develop those specific requirements. Now what we're going to do is move into section number 2, and we're going to talk about the equipment and the spare parts lists. Now, starting off with the first page, and the first page is not numbered, but it is the title page called Function Module 1. The function or the module pertains to the same numbering scheme that we addressed in pages 3 and 4 in section 1. The first paragraph illustrates the major byproduct of Module 1 is to identify all of your assets, equipment, whatever you call that, in the first module. And that would be by asset number, the location, and any other data relative to the asset. The second paragraph addresses the spare parts required to maintain that asset, including such things as lubricant, cleaning materials, or any other item which will be used by the maintenance group to maintain the integrity of the asset. Module 1, paragraph 3 also addresses the specific maintenance requirements. And here we're talking about preventative maintenance applications, minor, major overhauls, and also any predictive maintenance applications. Moving into the fourth paragraph, we're addressing one of the three disciplines that I talked about in section 1, and that is the new part notice or new item notice. And we will review the new item notice data and the documentation which is in this section. We will review that with you. Likewise, the next paragraph addresses the engineering change notice information. And here again, we have the documentation that supports an engineering change notice program, including a document for your consideration. Then we get into the next module, which pertains to the obsolescence program. Now we have one page in this section that identifies obsolescence, but the actual obsolescence application is covered in section number 3. And then the last paragraph pertains to the identification of the spare parts where used list, and that is a byproduct, as I said earlier, of the first module, and that is the input into Module 2, which will be covered in section 3 of the notebook. Now, there are some additional pages that identify what we call the equipment asset record layout. Now, these pages are very detailed, and they are put together so that you can pick and choose the development of your specific data that is going into the development of the equipment asset record and its associated data. The data really has 3 columns to it. The first column on the left identifies an item like A, B, C, D, and so forth. The second column, which is really the middle column, identifies that particular code. That is the alpha code. And the right-hand column identifies what you may want to consider relative to the record size, and that is the quantity that is listed in numeric terms, and that is followed by 1 or 2 characters. A is alpha, N is numeric, and where you actually see both alphanumeric, like on item A, the item part number, that would be for the equipment. That could be a alphanumeric 15-character field. Now, I'm not going to spend the time to read all of these data elements for you, but at least I've addressed how to read, okay, the various data elements, and the field sizes and the alphanumeric coding is based upon our experience working with hundreds of different companies over 30+ years. So my recommendation is for you to review these 3 pages and pick and choose and develop your own item master record data. Remember, the first function within the 3 major requirements to support a successful CMMS is user-defined. So here is how you would use these particular record layouts. As we move through the balance of the various sections in the notebook, we're going to have a recommended record layout for each one of those sections. So I just want to identify what those sections look like, the data that is contained in those particular documents, and how you should consider using those documents. So now what I want to do is actually turn to page 1 for this section, which is entitled the Equipment, Machinery, Asset, History Record File. Now, in the second paragraph, I've identified this tremendously large description, equipment, machinery, asset, put that into a very simplistic acronym called EMA, E-M-A. The reason for that, my experience has provided the ability to work with companies that have 2 or in some cases 3 different numbering schemes depending upon the input into the numbering program for assets. In other words, let's say the manufacturing division would have an equipment number, the maintenance organization would have a machinery number, and the financial department would have an asset number. All 3 are different. My recommendation is to have one number and everybody utilizes the same number. Well, we recognize again from experience you're not going to be able to change some of the old but probably poor habits. So therefore, my next recommendation is if you have 2 or more numbers, make certain that those numbers are all in the same item master record. Don't have 3 individual records. Have one record that identifies those 2 or 3 individual numbering schemes. Then after you have completed the implementation of all of the spare parts for the assets and all of the various maintenance requirements, you could spool off of that master record by either equipment, machine, or asset number. So let's take a look at some of the data elements that you may want to consider putting into now the first module, Module 1. Purchasing history relative to the asset. And that would include the purchase order, the original supplier, maybe the original quotation, the date of the PO, when it was received, and any other purchasing history such as cost, and again, any other data. Second would be installation data. Maybe you had to have some assistance from a contractor because of the nature of the equipment, and basically the maintenance organization didn't have either all of the skills or the tooling or the equipment to install a asset. Third would be all of the operational data or operating data, and that would include such things as power consumed, voltage characteristic, current characteristics, other applications like hydraulics, pneumatics, water systems, fire protection, and so forth. Item number 4 pertains to all of the maintenance requirements. And here again, this would pertain to the PM program, the minor, the major overhaul, and any other maintenance requirement to maintain the integrity of that particular asset. 5 is the recommended spare parts list, and that means all spare parts that may be used by maintenance at some point in time. Now, it is the recommended spare parts list, which is a byproduct of the asset, that actually is used to develop the spare parts where used list. Item 6 would be dismantling and movement data. Many companies are moving from the traditional large manufacturing department to either cellular manufacturing or focus factory. In these cases, we may have to move equipment to support those types of manufacturing activities. So dismantling and movement data would be a key to the successful movement of assets. Item 7 is all maintenance costs since the equipment, machine, or asset was obtained, and naturally those maintenance costs would actually be developed for Module 9, which is the financial module of the maintenance management program. Now, item number 8 and 9 and so forth would pertain to any other information that you feel is necessary to support the history record file for your assets. Now, moving on to page number 2, we're talking about the development of the maintenance criteria itself, and that really pertains to the development of the equipment identification numbers, which is step 1. 2 is the development of what we call modularized numbers, and I'll show you in a moment a document and a record that addresses that issue. But a modularization program is to take a very large piece of machinery and break it down into either smaller sections or functional requirements, such as electrical distribution system, lubrication system, safety and health system, and so forth. And that supports the implementation of a PM program where you have a multi-craft environment. Item 3 is the development of all of the equipment's maintenance requirements that we previously discussed on the previous page. Now, we have to develop in step 4 the various records and files, and that's why it's important to maintain the integrity of these files and records by a new part notice system and also an engineering change notice system plus the obsolescence program. The development of the spare parts requirements in step 5, which pertains to the maintenance work order planning and scheduling activity, which also includes the lubrication, the cleaning, and the safety requirements. Now, while we were in section 1, I indicated that I'm going to try and help you to devise a maintenance work order planning and scheduling system that can support the input by machine operators, and that would either be through predictive maintenance or TPM. What we have done is we have over a period of years, taken the option that there are 4 individual maintenance activities to maintain assets. One is the changing of spare parts. That's the first data element in item number 5. The second would be lubrication of that asset. Third, the cleaning of that asset. And fourth, the safety and health requirements of that asset. Now, by separating the maintenance requirements into these 4 groups, I think you can readily see that lubrication, cleaning, and safety and health requirements can be done by machine operators. And at some point in time, when you're going to consider TPM, total productive maintenance, then you could blend the spare parts program between craft personnel and operations personnel. And we have been very successful in supporting the integration of machine operators in maintenance applications through this division, if you will, of a maintenance work order. Step number 6 pertains to the special tooling, the equipment and documentation that may be required to support a maintenance work order. And step 7 are the craft requirements, and step 8 pertains to the different records and files. And if we just take a look at those, we've discussed many of these. In fact, I think we've discussed all of them, but this is an integral part of establishing the data elements for your assets. 8A would be the inventory management system. B is the purchasing system. C would be the stores program. D is craft capacity planning. E is the work order planning and scheduling system. And F is the work order reporting system. And last, we would have the financial analysis and reporting system. So you could see that all of these programs are an integral part of CMMS, which I have previously identified as modules. Now, turning to page number 3, we're going to take a look at some assets that you may want to consider in your asset part numbering program. The first one would pertain to manufacturing equipment. Now, since most manufacturers are very diverse in the types of manufacturing equipment they have, you may want to have a first field, maybe 2 digits, straight numeric, which would identify the specific type of manufacturing equipment, such as punch presses, milling machines, drilling machines, CAD/CAM applications, robotics, and any other application where you could put those together into one unified equipment listing. The key byproduct of that type of a listing is to support the development of the PM activities and also to reduce the development time of the PM program. Secondly, we could have material handling equipment, and again, where it's necessary, we can identify the first field into its individual material handling equipments. Third would be the tool room equipment. Fourth is the maintenance equipment used by maintenance, basically in their repair shops. 5 would be laboratory equipment. 6, R&D equipment, which is research and development equipment. 7, transportation equipment, which is different from 2 above, which is material handling. And transportation would be more of the types that you would be transporting your materials from one facility to the other. We call that over-the-road type of transportation. And then 8, we have fire protection equipment. And 9 would be buildings. 10 is generating equipment. And then 11 would be grounds, and in grounds we're not only talking about the grounds from the standpoint of grass and shrubbery, but we're also talking about the roadways, the parking areas, and anything else that pertains and requires maintenance relative to supporting those assets. And again, 12 and 13 are for your additional use where you may want to increase the data that we have described for you on page number 3. Now moving to page number 4, we're moving into what I call functional modularized requirements. And these pertain to those companies that have what I have made reference to earlier, which is a craft-oriented operation where we have multi-crafts as opposed to just one singular craft. So we could take assets and break those assets into functional requirements like 1, the electrical systems, 2, the hydraulic systems, 3, pneumatic systems, 4, computer systems, and the computer systems here pertains to those applications that are actually require computer control, like a CAD/CAM, computer-aided design, computer-aided manufacturing, or let's say computerized automatic storage and retrieval systems, and any other application where computerization is a key requirement to support that particular asset and its activities. Item 5 would be material handling systems within an organization, such as monorail systems or overhead conveyors or other conveying type systems. We would have the robotic systems, and 7 is fire protection systems. 8 would be the water lines pertaining to operational requirements. 9 is the lighting systems. 10 is the safety systems, and 11 would be heating systems, and that's not to be commingled with item 12, but here we're talking about heating relative to heating for processes or heating the facilities themselves, where item 12 would pertain to, let's say, HVAC relative to refrigeration and cooling systems. And then again, item 13 would pertain to other types of modularized requirements within your own operation. Now moving on to page number 5, we have an exhibit here which demonstrates what we call a CAD/CAM application. In other words, we have a computerized driven milling machine. The machine number in the upper left-hand corner is called 102. And if you look around the periphery of the machine, you're going to notice that it has module numbers associated with machine number 102. If you would move down to the lower right-hand corner, we have module numbers 10201 and 10202. Those are electrical panels. Therefore, any maintenance requirements such as PM, major minor overhaul, would require electricians. Moving to the left, we have module 102-03. That is a computer-driven application. That's the CAM portion of the CAD/CAM system. In this case, we may require an electronic technician to support the maintenance requirements for that module. And I'm going to move all the way to about the mid left-hand side where we have module number 102-06. And you notice that that arrow points to the turntable. This means that I need a mechanic who will support the maintenance requirements for that particular module. There are two key byproducts for modularization. One, it assists the individuals that are developing the PM and major and minor overhead requirements to minimize the development time of those systems. But most importantly, number two, it tells the craft person by work order where that module is located. And many companies are actually, with the support of CMMS, are actually showing a diagram like this as an integral part of the maintenance work order. So a person doesn't have to go out to a very large piece of machinery or process and determine where am I going to perform this maintenance activity for this specific maintenance work order. Modularization will zero in on the answer to that question and eliminate any unnecessary time. Now, what you are looking at here is an actual screen capture for machine 102, identical to the layout which was on page number 5. Now, the use for this is twofold, if you remember from my comments when we were looking at this modularization illustration on page 5. And this happens to be page 5.1 in the notebook, or 5-1 in the notebook. It's used for two reasons. First of all, it assists the planner scheduler to develop in some appropriate format all of the PMs, the major and minor overhauls for machine 102, but primarily by a module number. Number two is the reduction of craft labor time when that employee, or it could be a group of employees, go to machine 102 to perform a maintenance task. This screen capture will show them specifically where that PM work order is to be performed. So here we're saving time on the job relative to utilizing this type of software application in our computerized maintenance management system. So let me kind of, if you will, go back over the two major byproducts of this type of a software application. First, the reduction of the time it takes for a planner scheduler to put together the PMs and the major and minor overhauls. And secondly, the reduction of craft labor while they're out in the plant or the shop to perform that specific maintenance work order activity. Now what I want to do is to move into the next page, page number 6, and we want to address the world-class requirement that we identified as the 6th type of maintenance system in section 1. And if you remember, I said the objective is to integrate the planning activity of maintenance with the planning activity of operations. Now, in order to accomplish that, the first paragraph stipulates that both maintenance and manufacturing must have the same number. That is the same asset number. The equipment number is found on the maintenance work order, and the equipment number in operations is generally found on the routing or the process sheet. And the routing and process sheet is generally an integral part of the manufacturing or operations work order. Now, if the first paragraph is met, then the second paragraph indicates that we can, through those two individual planning documents, the maintenance work order and the manufacturing work order, integrate those two planning and scheduling systems. And that can be done by one individual. That is, one person can plan and schedule both production and maintenance. And when that is accomplished, I will guarantee that you're going to increase the utilization of your assets, because you're going to minimize the fighting that goes on between operations and maintenance when there are both maintenance and production orders for the same piece of equipment for the same time period. Remember what I said earlier. Currently, we have a production planning system that is computerized. We also have a computerized maintenance system, CMMS. The two systems don't talk to one another. In order to become world-class, those two systems should talk to one another. And here's an indication of where and how that talking, that combination, can be accomplished. The next 3 pages, pages 7, 8, and 9, pertain to the development of the equipment, asset document, the spare parts document, and page number 9 is another equipment and spare parts form. Starting off with page number 7, we have in the upper right-hand corner the date and the revision number for this document. Looking at the data in the body of the document, we have the equipment part number. We also have on the second line the asset number, and on the next line, moving downward, we have the description of that particular asset. We also have the location, and then moving toward the center of the document, we have the maintenance requirements, such as preventative maintenance, the minor and major overhauls. Now, those maintenance requirements for this source document are identified by frequency codes, such as D is daily, W is weekly, M is monthly, and so forth. Those frequency codes are listed in section number 8, Maintenance Work Order Planning and Scheduling. And I'll make reference to those frequency codes when we are in that particular section. There is also a need to indicate who the individual was that prepared this source document and the date it was prepared. Likewise, if approval is required, we have an area here for approval by and the date of that approval. And then at the bottom, there is an area for additional comments. One of the most commonly known comments would refer to this new asset as being part of a particular, let's say, manufacturing department. And to be more specific, let's say this happens to be a 50-ton punch press. Then a comment at the bottom may indicate this is the 4th 50-ton punch press that we have purchased and is moving into either the punch press department number 10, or let's say it's a machine center number 10. That also will help the planner scheduler to determine if current PM and major and minor overhaul planned work orders have been developed, and if so, and there may be some similarity between those currently available and what may be required for this, let's say, asset, then that will likewise reduce the amount of time it takes to develop the maintenance requirements for this particular asset. Now, the next screen format has to do with the revision, or what we call the engineering change notice system. Now, in the notebook on page 7, which I just had gone through in some detail, we are showing you what a screen capture would look like, providing it's in the software. And remember, these screen captures or formats is your responsibility to define. If you go back to one of the original pages in section number 1, we talked about the 3 basic requirements of the maintenance management program. The first one was user defined. And you're going to see, as we go through the balance of this program, there are going to be many screen captures that we will present to you. This by no means illustrates that this is our recommendation that you follow these in detail. These are to provide the guidance relative to taking the data that we had gone through in page number 7 in great detail, and now providing you with the screen capture in terms of the same type of data that was in book form, and here it is in what we call screen format or screen capture form. You'll notice that at the bottom of this particular exhibit, we have additional comments. If there is a second page required, this can be provided based upon your specific user-defined requirements. Now, moving on to page number 8, we are looking at the equipment spare parts list. Now, up on the top left, we have a page number, which could mean that there is more than one spare parts listing. We have the date of the origination of this spare part listing, and then moving down in the center portion, we have the revision number of that particular spare parts listing. Now, looking at the body of the information, we start off with the left-hand column. That item number is a straight numeric listing. The first line is 1, the second line is 2, and so forth. And it merely identifies by line number a specific part number. And the reason for that, it's a discipline. The reason for that is there may be the same part listed on more than one page. And if an engineering change notice was going to be processed, that engineering change notice would include not only the page number, but the line number where that particular part number is found. Then moving to the right, we have the part number, we have the description, we have the asset number, if any, and if this were a motor and it was going to be depreciated by the financial department, then we would have the asset number as issued by finance. The UM is the unit of measure of the item. The class code is an inventory classification code, and that we will cover with you in section number 4 when we get into inventory management. The next column addresses whether the item, that is the spare part, is planned or unplanned, or it could be both. So we would include a P if it were planned, we would have a U if it were unplanned, and we could have a P/U, which indicate that the item is used both in the planned and the unplanned requirement. The next column to the right is the quantity required, and for the specific part number, we also have the capability of showing the revision number and the date of that revision. Now we have just completed the development of the asset or the equipment list in terms of its number and the description and the location the revision number, and so forth. And what we're looking at here, which is actually page number 8-1 in the notebook, and this particular screen capture, we're identifying the major format or layout, if you will, of the various spare parts that are going to be required by maintenance at some point in time, depending upon the specific maintenance work order, such as, are we going to perform a specific PM, and that PM will be performed based upon the individual frequency codes, which we're going to discuss in greater detail a little later in this program. So this list of the various spare part numbers is going to be developed by you, and you may choose to have a screen format identical to what you're looking at, or it can be tailored to your specific requirement. But let me just walk you through the headings as I did when we discussed page number 8. And here we have a part ID, which is really the part number. We also have the description. Now you'll notice that these columns that we're showing you are somewhat narrow, and if you need, as an example, wider columns for part number and description, again, those can be tailored to your specific requirements. If a spare part has an asset number that is assigned by finance, then we would assign that asset number to that appropriate part number based upon the numbering scheme provided to you by finance. Again, the UM is the unit of measure. The class code is the inventory class code, which we will discuss in a moment, and that is going to be reviewed in section 4 of the notebook. And then the next column is the indication of whether that specific spare part is either planned or unplanned. If it's planned, you would put a P. If it's unplanned, you would put a U in that column. So you could see we have the opportunity to kind of narrow that particular column. And if the spare part was used for both planned and unplanned, then we would put a P/U, which would indicate to the individual looking at this particular screen capture that that specific part number is used for both planned and unplanned requirements. Again, moving to the right, we have the quantity required, and you could see that particular width of that column could be reduced. Generally, we're dealing in units of 1s or 2s. We may periodically, if there were hardware items required, there may be a need for a 2-digit code like 10 or 12. And the last two columns pertain to the revision number of the specific spare part, and then we have the date of that revision number. Now what I would like to do is to address the extreme left-hand column, and those are an integral part of the screen format, and you'll notice they are numbered from 0 through 9. Again, there could be more lines per screen format, or there could be less. And those line numbers are tied in with the specific page number. And yes, you could have more than one page depending on the number of spare parts that are tied in with a specific asset number, so that when engineering change notices are processed, we would, in addition to having the asset number and its description, indicate the page number and the line number for that specific spare part that is being affected by the engineering change notice system. So again, based upon all of the data that we discussed with you on page number 8, we are showing you an actual data processing screen format. And again, you can tailor this to your specific requirement. But what we're trying to do is to provide you the continuity between the data that is in the notebook relative to the data that we are providing you for these particular screen captures. Now, moving on to page number 9, we're looking at another equipment record card. And in this case, I'm not going to go through all of the detail, but there is operating information in the mid section of this particular document. You'll also notice down near the bottom, there is a subheading called warranty information. And then also at the bottom portion of this document, we have the spare parts listing. And of course, this exhibit only shows the capability of listing 5 spare parts. If additional spare parts are required, that would be on a second page. But again, we would have the spare part class. That's the inventory class, which I made reference to. We'll look at that in section 4. We have the item number, which is the part number for the spare part. We have the description. And a very important element, we have the original equipment manufacturer's part number that the OEM of the equipment would purchase that spare part from. And you would want to have that information given to you by the OEM of the equipment. As you well know, if you purchase that spare part from the OEM of the equipment, you're going to pay some additional premium, whereas you could save money if you purchase the spare part directly from the OEM of the part manufacturer. When we get into the purchasing section of the notebook, I'm going to provide you with some data that you would put on a purchase order when you purchase a new asset, and it's going to identify the requirement that the OEM of the equipment, that is who you are purchasing the equipment from, provides you with this information. That is the OEM of the spare part. Now, moving on to the next 3 pages. Pages 10 and 11 identifies the data elements that are in a new item or a new part notice. And then on page 12, we're going to look at a form that you may want to consider establishing in your CMMS system. And again, I want to make notice that this is one of the 3 disciplines that I strongly recommend that you support and institute, and that is to keep CMMS data integrity up to 100%. Now, looking at some of the information here, we have item part number, and we have its description, number 2. We get into the unit of measure. We have the inventory class code, and again, that will be covered in section 4. We have a shelf life code. That's the expiration date established by the OEM of the spare part. And in this case, we will be reviewing the shelf life code in both the inventory management, the purchasing management, and likewise in the stores program. I said both. I meant all 3 of those particular planning activities will support the shelf life code. We have the item cost. We have the purchase order number and date indicated by 7. And then we have the vendor information under 8, which is the name and the address and the telephone number and the primary contact, the vendor part number, the description, and the vendor lead time. All of the information on 8 would be an integral part of the purchasing record. Item 9 is the new spare part listing, which would include for a new asset all of the spare parts, their description, the unit of measure, the inventory class code, the shelf life code, the vendor part number, the vendor description, the vendor lead time, and the item revision number. Now, before we move to page number 11, let me address the items from 1 to 7. Those items are the original data requirements for a spare part. The data that we just looked at under item 9 are all of the spare parts if the new item notice was for an asset. So this listing is twofold. It is for individual spare parts, and it is also used for the equipment and the equipment or assets spare part listing. Now, continuing on in page 11, we would have the revision number of those spare parts, the new part notice number itself. Now, if any documentation for the equipment or the spare part is required, such as blueprints and drawings under 12. 13 would be the installation data. Now you see we're looking at equipment or assets here, dismantling and moving information, operational information, the recommended PM program under 16 and 17 is the major and minor overhaul, and then 18 is the training of maintenance personnel for that asset, the training of machine operators for that asset, the safety features under 20 for that equipment or asset. 21 is the warranty and service provisions, and then 22 would be the development of the records for CMMS, such as the item master with all of the spare parts. That's going into module 1. Inventory management is module 2. The warehousing would be module 5. The purchasing is module number 4. And the maintenance work order scheduling would be module number 7. And the financial data would be in module number 9. So here again, we're putting together all of the records and the documentation through the new item notice or the new part notice system. We also have in 23, the installation data. In 24, we have operational data. Now, the next page, on page 12, is an example of a new item notice document or form. And it has all of the basic data elements that we have covered in the previous 2 exhibits. And again, that is provided for your review, and it is my recommendation that you institute a new item notice system, develop the procedures, the documentation, and also the disciplines to support CMMS. So use the data on page 12 as a guideline for you. Now, we have just concluded discussing the data on the new item notice document, which was described on page number 12. Now, page number 12-1 in the notebook is an actual copy of the screen capture that you are now looking at. And again, as I said previously in another exhibit, we're trying to maintain some continuity between the data in the notebook and also the data that appears on the various screen captures. And in this particular case, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through all of the detail, but you'll notice that we are defining the part number, which could be a new spare part or it could be a new piece of equipment, and all of the other pertinent data. Moving to the upper right-hand side, we would have the date of the new item notice and also the new item notice number. The balance of the information I have covered in detail with you on page number 12, but what we're basically trying to show you, and again, you're going to hear me say this several times, the data that is in a notebook, if that's the way you want to select the data for your CMMS applications, then you could actually have a screen capture with the data as it appears in front of you at this point in time. You do have the option to reformat, to lay out, to change the individual data elements and their names, and any combination thereof. Again, this is going to be a very important document, especially where you are receiving new pieces of assets or new spare parts, where maintenance has the responsibility to maintain the asset or to utilize the new part which is going to be tied in with a specific asset or machine number.